Why Sean Strickland vs Dricus Du Plessis is going to be amazing. Recently, Dana White announced that Dricus Du Plessis is going to be going up against Sean Strickland for the middleweight title in January. And although there were a ton of reports and even Dana himself said that Khamzat was probably going to be next for the title, I think Dricus is not only the right opponent, but this is also going to be an extremely fun matchup. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Sean Strickland has been a guy that's been in the UFC and has been very successful in the UFC for a really long time. He had a stint where he was fighting at the welterweight division. At this point, he's been fighting at the middleweight division for quite some time, and he's even had some catchweight fights at higher weight classes as well. But for a decent amount of time, a lot of people, including myself, saw Sean Strickland as a guy that was a real contender. He was definitely very good, but at the end of the day, a lot of people didn't necessarily think he was a true title contender. And originally when Sean was given the title shot against Israel Adesanya, most people, including myself, expected Izzy to absolutely run through this guy. At the time of hearing the news, I didn't really think there was any path to victory for Sean Strickland. He did have a really nice jab, and he does do a lot of nice things on the feet, but at the end of the day, I thought Izzy would be able to move away from that jab. He would be able to kick out Sean's legs, which has been something that Izzy does very effectively, but also is something that Sean struggles with, at least in the past, at checking leg kicks, and I thought Izzy would just eventually be able to either find a dominant decision or maybe even a finish. But of course, as we all know at this point, that fight could not have been any different. Sean did a great job at pressuring Izzy, throwing out that jab, even throwing out some left or right overhands, and he was even able to catch Izzy and drop him. And at this point, as hindsight is 2020, I think looking back at that matchup, it was actually a very good stylistic matchup for Strickland. Strickland's a guy that does most of his best work while he's pressuring his opponent, and Izzy's a guy that does most of his work backing up. So the fact that Strickland was able to so easily pressure Izzy and really get his game started was definitely something that helped him out tremendously. And the fact that he's also extremely defensively sound is another reason for why I think, looking back at that matchup, that Strickland is actually a nightmarish matchup for Izzy. And at this point, most people, including myself, see Strickland in a completely different light after that extremely impressive Izzy matchup. And going forward from here, I think he's a very legitimate champ that has a chance to beat a lot of different guys. But now let's move on to Dricus Du Plessis. So Dricus, similar to Strickland, has been a guy that's been very successful at the middleweight division. Although a lot of his matchups have been a little bit clunky and a little bit wild, at the end of the day, he was able to get the job done in a very unique style that he does possess. What Dricus does out there is, on the feet, he's going to pressure you, and even though his shots don't look the most technical, they actually look very wild. He does a really nice job at relying on his overall athleticism and relying on his overall physicality. He does a really nice job at getting in range, throwing his power shots, as he does have a ton of power in both hands, and more often than not, he's probably going to be able to knock you out. As in his most recent matchup against Robert Whittaker, he got an extremely impressive second round KO finish. And similar to the Strickland fight against Izzy, going into that matchup between Dricus and Whittaker, virtually nobody, including myself, thought that Dricus would be able to get it done. Because although Dricus was able to get some nice victories over Darren Till and Derek Brunson, at the end of the day, going from Derek Brunson to Robert Whittaker was a humongous step up. And especially based upon how he looked in those other two fights, like for example, in that Brunson matchup, he probably lost that first round, and in that Darren Till matchup, he gassed out relatively quickly and definitely didn't look good in the third round or even the second round of that fight. But in that Whittaker fight, he definitely did make a lot of adjustments. At this point, I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to be the cleanest striker or even the cleanest fighter out there, but what he does well and what he does effectively is just be very physical. And he utilizes his incredible strength and his incredible power and overall physicality to his advantage. And I think we saw exactly that in that Whittaker matchup, as he was a lot more physical than Whittaker was, and at the end of the day, he was able to do a lot of what he wanted with Rob and was able to get a second round TKO. But now let's get into the specific matchup between these two guys in Robert Whittaker and Sean Strickland, and let's get into my prediction. Well, I think this fight is actually a lot more difficult to predict than most others, and I think this can go in one of two ways, and both of them are extremes. I think the first case case scenario that could possibly happen is Strickland can have his way. If he's able to survive early on, as the fight does progress, he'll probably start to gas out Dricus a little bit, and if he can get a tired Dricus in front of him, he can definitely push him back with his pressure, utilize his jab, utilize his right overhand, utilize uppercuts, hooks, and crosses, and potentially cruise his way to a 5-round decision victory. Or maybe if Dricus is that gassed at the end of the fight, he might be even able to find a finish. Now I know Dricus's cardio definitely is improved, as we did see in that Whitaker matchup, but at the same time, this is going to be a 5-round fight, which is going to be longer than he's ever fought in the UFC. But also on top of that, you're going up against a guy in Sean Strickland, who in my opinion is one of the best, if not the best, at utilizing his stamina effectively. So I definitely think a lot of guys are going to tire out when fighting Strickland for 5 rounds, but especially Dricus Du Plessis is going to be a guy that probably will gas if it goes to the later rounds. But the other way that this fight can go is Dricus just is a little bit too physical for Strickland. He's a little bit too awkward, and he's eventually going to find Strickland's chin with one of his wild shots that he does throughout there and find the TKO finish. I could see Dricus starting in and throwing some wild power shots at Strickland, and even if he isn't able to land early, I think he's going to do a nice job at mixing things up. I think he's going to do a nice job at going for a takedown, and even if he doesn't get it, he just puts it in the back of Strickland's mind, and then going forward from there, maybe he fakes a takedown, throws a power shot, and finds Strickland's chin, or regardless, he's just able to somehow find his chin. I definitely could see that happening in this matchup as well. But if I had to give my official prediction at this point, I think I would go with Dricus Du Plessis. Although I'm probably going to go back and forth on this prediction multiple times before this fight starts, I just think this is that close of a fight. At the end of the day, the reason why I'm going with Dricus is I just like his overall physicality. I think he's a lot more physical than Strickland, and he's going to do a great job at darting in and pushing back Strickland to the cage, and eventually I think he's going to be able to find that TKO shot by throwing a lot of shots out there, also throwing in some takedowns, and as I said before, even if he doesn't get the takedown, just putting that threat in the back of Strickland's mind is going to change a lot of what he does individually, and I just think that's only going to favor Dricus. Because something that I talk about in some of my videos is physicality. I think physicality is extremely important in MMA. When you look at a lot of guys that are close in skill set, or sometimes not even close in skill set, but you talk about the guy that's a lot more physical, I think that guy just has a better chance to win a lot of fights. Because when you look at the Robert Whitaker matchup versus Dricus, it's pretty clear that Dricus is significantly less skilled and significantly less talented than Whitaker, but he was able to get a dominant 2nd round finish over Rob. So in my opinion, that example alone kind of just shows you how important physicality truly is in MMA. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this matchup, but I will say I am extremely excited to see what does. But if you guys are interested on betting on this fight between Strickland and Dricus, or you're even interested on betting on any of the fights coming up this weekend at UFC 295, head over to the first link in my description, which will take you over to BetUS, and you'll get 125% of your money for first-time users. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Dricus Du Plessis has a real chance to beat Strickland, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.